Coasys website to just talk about Coasys a bit more, because so last time in the last ecosystem session we were here, we just talked about ADAM and Flux and perspective. And we said before, we have been ADAM and perspective has merged with Flux, and Coasys in some ways now the, finishing up this merging process, and the organization, the name of the organization under which we operate and strive to build what we boldly say here, a digital nervous system for the new web. So, and just want to be clear, like, so we have ADAM as our core innovation, and Flux as our flagship app on ADAM, and Perspective as another important app. Those are like 3 different products that we as Coasys are working on. And the main thing we want to talk about now is the new product that we started working on, which we call the Synergy engine. And so that is like I just already say it's you can think of it as like a search engine, but a semantic search engine that can be used to find data in a distributed way, and in a way where you can you on a more semantic level. And yeah, also want to be clear, so we didn't even say this. So Moritz also joined our team, really happy to have him. Yeah.
Maybe I can just share a little bit of kind of context for why we think we need Synergy engine, also kind of beside of the whole AI issue, because for sure we're going to be living very soon in a world with overload of AI generated content, and we need some way to kind of verify what we trust. But essentially, like, ADAM enables us to create these kind of shared social spaces where I can invite people into my social space and we can collaborate together on data. But these are independent networks, and now they're Holochain networks, but they could also be any kind of protocol that enables communication with each other. So these are essentially kind of private and closed communication networks where people collaborate and communicate data. So how do you find information in a decentralized space where you have different networks communicating with each other? And this is what we're trying to solve basically with the Synergy engine, to have a way to kind of aggregate or find information across different private social spaces.
David, you remember in our last ecosystem session, I think we stretched the point about social DNA. We had this example in the end with the AI writing social DNA. So it is a core piece that in ADAM already, and the way we have been building Flux and Perspective, it's a central piece, because it's in essence it's a way to define semantics and like patterns, where we say, well, if you have if you have a piece of data and it has a name and it has several other pieces that are messages connected to it, that's what we call a channel, and that's a channel in Flux. And then you can also have a post that you define in a certain way. That's an aspect that has been an aspect of social DNA in ADAM. And yeah, when we in our last retreat in April this year, we came up with everything that we want to show now, and that we call Synergy engine. And it really is just, we realized how the same principle of social DNA that we use for apps internally or for social organisms internally, which is really just, the pattern of the data that we're interested in, that we give a name to it, and maybe some, interaction patterns. We can use the same idea to search data in this distributed way, but not in the way where, like currently when we search data, we have some central server crawling the web and storing stuff in a database, and then you just interact with, say, Google or ChatGPT. But instead, in the Synergy engine, what happens is that you define the data that you're looking for, And we use ADAM social DNA to represent the criterion of what you're looking for. And then we use the ADAM network to send out this query, the social DNA, so everybody can check locally if they have the data, basically reversing it, right? Now I want to go over, we have a diagram where we can show this in a bit more detail. And just please jump in if you have any questions. So I first, looking at this diagram, I just want to zoom out and talk about the agents. So we have, it all starts with me. You know, I have an ADAM agent running, which represents me and my agency. And so ADAM is this, on the one side, it's this framework for building apps, but it also is a social network, because baked into ADAM is friendship relationships. So I have other ADAM friends that also run ADAM agents. And as I just said, the idea is that in the Synergy engine, when looking for data, that I'm going to send out the query to my friends, and they can search for data locally and in their local perspectives, in their ADAM neighborhoods and social organisms. And if they don't find data, they would pass it on to their friends, who can also check if they have data, and so on, until there's somebody who has found data that matches the query. So, and then what? So they could just send it back to us. But if it's somebody who we don't know, I mean, if it's our friends, then maybe, you know, it could just work like that. I just sent the query to my friends, and if they have data, they would respond. But we wanted to think this a bit more like global and public. And then there's a question of like, you know, why would anybody who I don't know even worry about my search? I mean, they would have to spend at least some CPU cycles. And then even if they have the data, why would they respond with the data to me? So we connect all of this with a currency that we call Synergy Fuel, which has this capacity of creating vaults where the query is locked in with some units of currency. And the idea is that we, and this is where we need to build the full version of Synergy Fuel on Holochain, so that we can include the same social DNA check that we currently run locally on ADAM nodes in this currency, so that basically what we do when sending out a query, we lock in a reward, and we make the data that matches the query be the key for that lock, so that anybody down the line here is incentivized to, well, pass on the query and also to respond to the query, because in the end, with the query data, they can basically get the reward that's locked in here. So that's the basic overview. And please, anybody jump in or ask a question. I would go and maybe just drill in a bit into these details, what happens at each step.
I would extend with a few things. I mean, firstly, this is a really interesting kind of flywheel for the ADAM network, because as you start using ADAM apps, you become a candidate for being able to respond to queries. And then by that, you're a candidate for being able to make Synergy Fuel. And then additionally, the data which can be found in these social spaces, I mean, in the beginning, if we just have apps like Flux and others running, would be Flux data, or, you know, messages happening in Flux or posts or anything like that. But there's no reason that this can't be extended such that I might create a social space where we all collectively agree that we want to index Twitter, or we want to index Google Maps, or we want to bridge one of these other services. And by pulling that data into our space and running our own index, we actually start to break the data out of the existing Web 2 silos and bring it into this space. And this is something that's super hard to do now because the APIs are so locked down. And it's very hard to bring that information in. So we actually make available all of the hidden and stuck data in these Web2 spaces to this semantic search engine, to the ADAM network. And then people could actually even tie their ADAM agent into their Twitter data and start to make those connections to existing Web2 spaces.
Right. Okay. So I want to run through an example. It's funny, we had this example in our retreat because Josh lives in Bristol, and we just go and visit him, and we don't know about Bristol, but we want to find a good rave event in Bristol because we like techno music. So this is an example we have been running through a few times. So what we imagine is that we want to package a local run AI with ADAM. I think we mentioned this last time already. We have been thinking about this for some while, and maybe just for interfacing with perspective data and creating social DNA. But it really shines here as well, because I mean, this is not different to just creating social DNA. So we would have this local run AI, which translates this English text, you know, I'm looking for good rave events in Bristol, to something that might look like this. So this is on purpose a bit more complicated, so we can run through an example that makes sense and shows the capacities of the synergy engine and social DNA. And while our social DNA in the end is written down as Prolog code, as Prolog rules, this is a graphical representation of it. In essence, it's just associations between pieces of data. So what this means here is we're looking for something, and this something, well, first of all, should be an event. And the AI would make this explicit by saying, yeah, this something is associated with something else that has a start date, or with the predicate start date. And then we could be more specific. It needs to be in the month of September. And then also an event also has a location, which also needs to be in or close to Bristol. Right? And then, but then how do we say that it is a rave event? So it's an event where we have performers, so some agents. So we have other agent expressions that represents an agent with a DID. And also because, I mean, this is all agent-centric and we rely on provenance of data. We also want to make sure that these are real agents. So we want to have some proof of personhood attached to them. And we want these performers, not just any performer, they need to have authored at least 3 items, which are, again, have further criteria, like it has to be music and it has to be in the genre of techno. Right. So at this point, I would have a graph structure, social DNA, that describes a techno or rave event. But then how do I make it be a good rave event? Well, I want others to have liked it. And so I could say, well, okay, these things each need to have at least 1,000 liked by associations, where the people who are liking it, again, we know they are real humans. And then we could even go further. And we could stop here, but just to show what becomes possible when we allow for this very flexible, free way of defining these data associations, we can also tie it in to ourselves by saying, well, we want at least 10 of these people who are liking it to be friends with somebody who is friends with us, with maybe a maximum degree of separation of 5 or less than 5. So, and the reason I want to show this a bit more complicated example is to stretch the point that if we define data in this way and we trickle it down to these proof of personhoods, and so each of these are expressions in ADAM languages. What that means is they are like with Holochain, everything is signed. We have data provenance. That's in some ways what ADAM says as an API layer that needs to be the case. In Holochain, it is anyways. So we crest everything to be signed by these agents. What it means is you can't just come up, you can't just manufacture a piece of data, a perspective or a graph that matches these criteria while not violating the different signatures, because we are requesting, I mean, in this case, more than 1,000 or even 3,000 different signatures of different people. So that's why it can't just be, even with an AI, you can't just ask ChatGPT to create this data that matches this, because it can't break cryptography. Okay, so then, like we said before, what happens next is we have this query, this definition of the data we're looking for. And then what my ADAM node would do automatically is, post it in the Synergy Fuel currency DHT as a vote, and attach some funds as rewards to it, which maybe this is not automatic. I would have to pick how much I'm willing to pay. We have been discussing lots of different schemes of like what you want to pay and who gets it. There's a lot of things that can be configured. But also what I'm showing here is like a baseline of what the basic structure is that the Synergy engine will implement. Like for instance, we could also imagine queries that have no reward at all, but then it wouldn't go past our friends. But then it also will be sent out to my friends. So I have friends Alice, Bob, and Chris. And like we said, they will go and search their local perspectives or their shared neighborhoods, data that maybe they only have access to. And then they will send it on. But what we also have is this, what we call social stack. So this is, we call it social stack because it is something that will grow with each hop, almost like a call stack in programming. Basically like a breadcrumb trace of who has seen this query, and also a signature. It's basically, these are trust atoms, like with trust graph, and we're intending to make it compatible and use the trust graph definition for that. So it's basically saying that I trust Bob, and I trust Chris, and I trust Alice, and I sign that. And as we will see later, Alice and Bob, they will need this as a proof in order to claim the reward. So if they don't find the data locally, they will send it on to their friends. And they will have to do the same thing. They take the current social stack and they will add another trust atom. So Alice saying that they trust Grace, right? And Bob saying they trust Henry and Ingrid. And Henry passes it on to Zine. And by then we have this 3 hop social stack. So, and then Zine happens to have data in the local perspective. So there's some nice KitLab boat party in the boat in Bristol. And they are performers, and they also are liked. So what we intentionally leaving open here is how this data is being collected. Could be that Zine has this data because maybe they use a Spotify-like app on Atom where they collect these likes. Could also be the case that on the way through as the query traverses the network, Bob and Henry, they have pieces that are parts of the puzzle, which their Atom nodes would recognize and maybe send on so that the data gets collected along the way. It's actually something that we don't want to specify too much, because we think different Atom apps and users could come up with new ideas and new solutions here. Main thing is we're just checking that we have the data, and also that we have a social stack which has a consecutive connection from me to the person who is responding to the query, so that we can rule out bots or any agents that we don't trust. It's basically we know that this data is not only valid in terms of our definition, but our query, but we also have some kind of trust relationship to the person who is resolving the query. And then both things will be, so Zine can then use both things to post to the Synergy Fuel currency and unlock the funds. And maybe as a last item here to say, if I want to take a break, is the social stack will also be part of the data that's being put in, which means that in my query, I can already talk about the social stack. I can be more specific. I could say, well, I only want to ask people, I only want to have the query be propagated to agents who, well, have visited this last Brave event I also went to, for instance, or who have a particular proof of personhood that they where they can deliver the proof. Basically anything. These agents and the social stack will just be part of the data and the query as the content itself. That is basically the synergy engine. Yeah, I talked a lot, guys. Do you want to add anything? We'll continue.
Just maybe like a very small thing is that like here we start with friends, because that's maybe the most kind of common use case, but you could also imagine maybe you move to Bristol and you don't have any friends yet, but you find a neighborhood that you join and it has a lot of people interested in techno parties. You could also start from a different starting point. So you can just select the agents that you want to ask about specific information, and then they would check their social spaces and they would start asking their friends, but at least being able to change the kind of perspective of where you start looking for the data is also possible.
Because you might get a different answer for the same query depending on where you start. Like, who are your friends? Which is particularly interesting if we think of, I mean, you might want, if you want to do good sense making, you might want to have your query be so explicit that that is not the case, that it's just a matter of finding data, but it's you're basically asking, you're so explicit in your query graph that there's not much flexibility. But of course, you could also have a query graph, either by accident or on purpose, that is more like an opinion poll, right? And then you would get different results, especially if it's like a political poll, on, you know, in which the global neighborhoods, in which kind of mimetic tribe you start the query. So this is one of many, like we have a lot of examples we could go through and applications that we see. One I'm kind of amazed by is how we could run the same query and basically also log, like, okay, this is the query and it was run from this agent and this agent, and then see the different results and also the social stacks, and it would kind of enable you or anybody to get like a holistic view of the network and of the mimetic tribes and of basically the sense making clicks that you would have.
Another thing that is very cool is that you could also put in a query and let it just run, and you would get notifications when specific patterns emerge, and they get notified to you. So what is kind of cool about this is that you could kind of search for good rave events in Bristol, but if you don't find anyone, then you could just leave it open and you could have an app on your phone, for example, and get a notification when someone finds information. So I think this also is kind of a solution to a challenge today where if you want to find good events, there are some websites, but a lot of people use, for example, Instagram today, and they just follow a lot of accounts and they have to kind of constantly keep checking and making sure that they're like updated on what's happening. But if you're able to kind of define these patterns that you're looking for, you could have these sort of subscriptions to patterns, so you get notified.
And additionally, the reverse could also be true. So you could see a query come in, and if you see that maybe it needs a picture taken in a certain location or a review added for a specific place for you to complete the query, it could actually be an activation mechanism for people to actually respond to queries as they see a query come in. If they think they can create some data which would match the query, they can go ahead and do that, contribute to the network, and get rewarded for doing so.
Right. So say, for instance, we have this query with the Rave event, but I said, I do want to have like a 10 or 30-second audio recording of somebody being at the event right now, because I want to listen how good the music is. And, maybe, you are at the event and your ADAM agent finds like almost all of the data, just this one piece missing. So we imagine, we could both like the internal prologue engine in ADAM and also the local run AI are things which would help us to identify this and notify you at the event, hey, there's Nico looking for, Rave events, and you almost have everything. You just need to, take a recording and then you can claim the reward. And this is where you can see it's the synergy engine is really like the abstraction of like, finding these synergistic connections between agents, and all these Web 2.0 apps that we have right now, where two agents are set in contact, like, Airbnb or eBay or Uber or Tinder or LinkedIn, they are all just, from the perspective of the synergy engine, they are all just different social DNAs, right? And which in some ways with ADAM, we have been thinking about this way anyways. The social DNA, even without the synergy engine in ADAM, is just the quintessence of an app. And the synergy engine adds to this that, you just need to define the social DNA, the real data association that you care about. And you also get distributed finding of data discovery. And I wanted, so maybe on that note, we have been thinking about this with the local AI, and I think really the use case that we are approaching, that we're aiming for, is that you can compare this almost to how you would use ChatGPT. You talk to your local ADAM agent. I want to know about blah, 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 blah. It's translating it on the back end to this query, asking the network, finding the data, giving it to you. So in the end, it should be something like an AI agent that doesn't hallucinate, but uses the collective intelligence of the network to respond to data. But at the same time, we are already talking and trying to come up, and we have partnerships already lined up for people building specific apps where it's a specific synergy they are interested in, and basically using this as the backend engine to have the network and the data discovery.